think of us as consumers, right? Like you had one or two options. Now I've got limitless options. And how do I base my decisions? They're based on trust. They're based on social proof. They're based on recommendations and referrals.
Welcome to the Tech Savvy Recruiter, the podcast for recruitment and staffing agency owners keen to explore the tech innovations reshaping our industry. I'm Andrew Roger from RecMate.
And I'm Belinda Kerr from Recruitment Garage, and together we're your hosts, bringing you a stellar lineup of recruitment tech and AI experts ready to help you understand and, more importantly, benefit from the increasing array of tech available to you today. A very warm welcome to you, Dexter Cousins. Dexter is a great guest to be having on because he understands the world of recruitment, because he has his own exec search firm and has done for almost 10 years called Tier 1 People, an executive search firm for FinTech venture companies. Dexter really plays in that AI tech space as well, that FinTech space. And I thought we've been communicating for a while, and Dexter has some really good insights into the world of AI and tech and where it's leading recruitment. And I thought he'd have some wonderful things to share for our audience of recruitment founders. And also, just a quick note, check out his podcast called FinTech Chatter Podcast. He's done over 350 episodes, so he knows what he's talking about and has some really interesting guests there as well. So a lovely, warm, tech-savvy recruiter podcast to you, Dexter. How's things?
Great. Thank you, Belinda. Thank you, Andrew. Yep, things are good. Thanks. As I said off show, like every other recruiter, it feels like I'm going a million miles an hour on a rocking horse going nowhere at the minute. But yeah, things are good. So, really cannot grumble.
Yeah, amazing. And is there anything else there you'd like to add about your background or anything that you'd like to share before we sort of dig in deep?
I think just really that kind of through my career. So next year I'll be 27 years in recruitment. I've worked with some incredible people, so notably here in Oz, people like Greg Savage, Michael Markovich. So I've kind of seen the old school recruitment world and kind of now the new recruitment world as well. And when I started Tier 1 People nearly 10 years ago, I think it was really about taking those core elements, but then recognizing as well that, hey, the world was changing. The role of recruitment was changing. The role of a recruitment business and agency was changing as well. And really kind of how could I adapt that to create my business, and what would that business look like as well in a world of technology?
Yeah, amazing. Well, that's probably a really nice place to start, actually. And what are some of the things that you're embracing, even if they're not sort of fully embedded yet? Like, what are your thoughts just generally?
Yeah, look, it's I think I'd start off with, I'm not here to kind of do the doom mongering stuff. I want to kind of be really honest and open and transparent with people. And I think one of the things that I'm known for within my network is no BS, no fluff, just call it how you see it. And there are two parts to AI, and I think like that, if I was to look at the traditional recruitment model and that's what I had, I would be absolutely bricking myself right now, because I don't see a role for that kind of sausage factory recruitment in the world that we've got now. If you're a specialist recruiter, I think you're now at a point where, what a time to be alive. Right? Really, what a time to be alive. There are huge opportunities out there. And whatever it is that you want to do, whether you want to build your own enterprise yourself, or you just want to help other people build their enterprise and have a business that you can kind of have a little bit of work-life balance. I think there's every option out there for you. The tools now that are available, and I actually remember I was talking to my wife just before coming on the show and saying, I remember actually 10 years back first becoming aware of, Belinda, when you'd started your kind of recruitment garage style business model. And I was thinking about going out on my own, and it was all of the things that you were like, I need systems, I need, leads, all of this infrastructure that you needed to start a recruitment business. And if you didn't have capital, you wouldn't be able to do it. Yeah. And so now you look at that, and I'm sure you've experienced this yourself, Belinda, as well, as to how you've had to evolve your business models and your offerings as technology has just made it, it's removed all the barriers to starting a business. So I think for me, I think we're at a really incredible point where the things that I think differentiated recruiters when I started are still the things that are going to differentiate you in this market, which is, the fundamental truths and what I call the immutable truths of It's about, and this was a quote from Greg Savage when I first met him, was, it's about finding the right people fast. And that remains true today as it did in 2004 when I first met Greg. And then it's, the other stuff of my first mentor and hiring through the .com crash, which was just follow the money. And so these little kind of things that you hear that you kind of stick to as principles of the business, I think they're the things that are the immutable truths. The things around it, the noise, the technology advancements, all of those things, we've seen all of these. If you've been in the game long enough, you've seen these evolutions. When I started in the late 90s, we actually had a Rolodex and green cards for clients, white cards for candidates, and literally you would go through and you had one option to or two options to advertise jobs. You could put them in the shop window, or you could put them in the local paper on a Thursday evening and have people kind of mail in resumes. And then all of a sudden job boards came out and we started to put computers into the workplace. And we'd had one computer to do payroll, and then all of a sudden everybody had one, and we had email, and we weren't faxing resumes anymore. And then job boards came along and we were told, hey, we're going to be dinosaurs, you're not needed anymore. But what actually happened was our clients started to get thousands and thousands of applications when they were used to getting 20, and they needed, they couldn't do it. And so, if anything, the recruitment industry grew off the back of job boards. It didn't disappear. And kind of fast forward to 2008 and the GFC, and all of a sudden, kind of the recruitment gets hammered again. And we're told that in the internal recruitment teams, we don't need you anymore. We've got LinkedIn. Guess what? Kind of all of a sudden, the world changes. What businesses are looking for starts to change. And all of a sudden, specialist recruiters start to fly once again. And I think we're seeing a similar point now, right, where those recruiters who aren't evolving and developing their skills and really staying relevant are the ones who are going to suffer.
I think what's really lovely about what you've said there, Dexter, is especially for some of the younger founders, like we are a very adaptable bunch of people, I think, recruitment founders, recruiters in general. And that's sort of showing the timeline and the evolution. Yeah, that's only 20, you've just sort of covered off 25 years there. It's not a long, well, for me, it doesn't seem a long time now, I'm getting older. But I love what you've said there, because the younger people, I think, who are maybe they're in their late 20s and they haven't seen all of that. And now it's like, here comes AI and tech, look out. It can be, is this the end of it? But we've seen similar rodeos. I know AI is very different, and but still we have seen different rodeos. And I think now we're at the point with AI where we are seeing its failings. We're seeing that it's not the panacea that it perhaps was being touted as 2 years ago. Things are still changing, and we're certainly in that phase of growth. But I'm kind of buoyed every time I read something on a post that, where AI has kind of failed. I kind of go, good, one for the humans.
Yeah. I think it like all technologies, and I remember, I think this was like 2000 or 2001. We actually trialed and pioneered video interview technology, and it was an absolute disaster, right? Like the principle of it was fantastic. The method behind it made a lot of sense. And I'd invite people in and they would record, sit in front of a computer screen like this and record themselves. And it was embarrassing, right? You were like, you can't put that in front of a client. A really good accountant. It was like, wow, like, because people weren't used to it and they weren't accustomed to it. And so what I've found is, when I moved to Australia 2004, I was one of the first digital recruiters in Australia. And what we were finding then was exactly the same problem that we've got now. The technology was moving faster than people could actually learn it. And so, what you've got is that humans are always lagging behind in being able to keep up pace with it. When I first started in recruitment, as I mentioned, we went the computerization of the workplace, and, all of a sudden people were expected to use Microsoft Word and be able to type and use Excel. And that transition, took I would say like at least 3 to 5 years where people were given training and development. We're not getting that kind of luxury of time or luxury of training and development now. And so it's very much on the individual to be able to develop those skills themselves. And I think this is where AI for recruiters actually is going to be give them the most uplift. The automation stuff, it's not doing anything that we weren't doing 20 years ago and then email blasted the database, right? I think the only thing that it's done is, and myself, I'm guilty of this, is maybe relying too much on LinkedIn as a communication platform. And so over the last year and a bit, really tried to remove that and kept it very much more as a marketing tool and a broadcasting tool, rather than an actual candidate search, candidate communication tool. And I think one of the reasons for that has been that, with a lot of this technology, LinkedIn's APIs make it really difficult to kind of do anything at scale. And also, it's really difficult to track. So what I've found is actually with AI, it's enabled me to go back to my old ways of working. Excel spreadsheets are easy to plug in and start to then automate things through using tools like Relevance, which is a Sydney AI startup, which is doing some incredible stuff. But the kind of adaptability now that you have with these tools to work your workflow, right? So not a job adder and what they determine it is. One of the things that I did when I started Tier 1 People was to really kind of, I guess, first principles ask, what is the fundamental of what you do and who's the most important person in that? And for us, it was, hey, well, the clients pay the invoice. So instead of being very candidate driven, we should be client driven. And so of my clients, what tools are they using for marketing and sales? And they were using Salesforce and HubSpot and all these other tools, right? So we decided to go, hey, let's use HubSpot and we'll use that as an actual, and we found it's brilliant, right? Because at the end of the day, candidate kind of recruitment is actually just marketing. It's not, it's not sitting in a database and going, hey, here's 5 people that are available, sticking it out on Seek. It's actually, you got to do 2 things. One is have a really attractive opportunity. And then 2, be able to verbalize that, kind of advertise that in ways that get people excited and engaged. And I think this is where kind of recruiters, if I'm going to be critical, haven't really developed and evolved. So put the AI tools to one side. I think what they've not understood is how the kind of consumer world has changed over the last 15, 20 years, where you just think of us as consumers, right? Like you had 1 or 2 options. Now I've got limitless options. And how do I base my decisions? They're based on trust. They're based on social proof. They're based on recommendations and referrals. They're not based on advertising. We all know, right? Google's just listened in and we're getting pumped with ads for tires, which is, I've already bought them. So I think that the kind of traditional forms of advertising and marketing are really where I'd say the biggest kind of opportunity to be using technology. And that's where I'm doing a lot of the kind of AI work and automation. The conversational stuff, I kind of took the experience of the video interviews very early. And, I've got friends who, been clients where they were working this conversational AI stuff and it's incredible. But ultimately, I know that every single candidate that I speak to wants to speak to a human, not an AI. And the job of a recruiter is to influence that person to get them from being, accepting an email to getting intrigued into an opportunity. And that's essentially what your client's paying you for. So I think that they're the kind of, I think, I know I've talked a bit there, but that's a real summary as to where I see kind of the world of recruitment right now and some of the things that's probably struggling with identity-wise.
Yeah, it's interesting. I really picked up on a couple of things there, Dexter, around core fundamentals of what recruitment is and how we service our clients, be it candidates or our hiring managers, and then blending that with modern ways to amplify that in a professional way. I think you mentioned...
I would actually say that a candidate is a stakeholder, not a client. And I think ultimately, this is where recruitment agencies get
it's
into
a sticky
problems.
Topic, isn't it? Yeah.
Well, it's just, look, your client's paying the bill, right? You should be acting on you're an extension of their business. You're acting on their behalf. And I think this thing of, trying to be everybody's friends, right? Like, I'm not Jerry Maguire. I'm not getting 10% of the candidate's salary. I'm here to deliver for my client. They're the one who wears the risk if it goes wrong, right? And my business is then impacted and I've lost a client if it goes wrong. I think, this is where recruitment kind of has to get clear about, hey, look, who do you serve? And I think that's where it's really, when you do that, then you can build your systems and your strategies around how you actually grow the business and your marketing and your LinkedIn presence and all of that stuff. I think where the frustration for me is that, when agencies talk about spending money on advertising, they're not actually representing their clients, right? They should be actually representing their clients and promoting their names. And this is where the podcast has been a really effective tool for business development, is that, we're making our clients the heroes. And that in itself attracts the best talent. We don't have to say, oh, come, we loved candidates. We love you. It's like, come and get some free advice. Say it's not what we're paid for, right? And it's kind of not what we do, right? So I think this is where, if we can get clarity around our purpose and why we exist, these tools will absolutely make us highly relevant.
I always maintained if you could get the good clients, you'd get the good candidates.
Yeah, it's absolutely, Belinda. And that's one of the core principles of our business is, if we get the best opportunities, the talent will follow. And you hear this rubbish, right, where candidates say, oh, I'm working exclusively with this recruiter. And it's bullshit, right? I mean, that's stuff that happened in the 80s when you had Morgan and Banks and like HJB and who else was there, right? It was, you were waiting for Heidrichs and Struggles to give you a call. It's not how it works anymore. And I think this is where, we kind of have to adapt to the behaviors of our customers, right? Because I get that my clients, one day they're going to be a candidate as well, right? And I don't really make a distinction. They're just people, right? Like that, I'm going to treat with respect regardless of what, I guess what kind of format that's in. But at the end of the day, you have to be clear with people to say, hey, look, this is who I'm representing. We're not friends now. It's, I've got to assess you and I've got to make sure that you're the right fit for my client.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. So I think, we sometimes forget we really should be thinking we're an extension of their internal team, the client's internal team. And, the closer we can get to being sat in their office, the closer a relationship we build.
And look, I think it comes back to what type of business you're trying to build, right? Like if you want to build a sausage factory recruitment business, you're never going to get that, right? Like you're playing a numbers game and that's great, right? Like the model works, we know it does, but how much longer that model will work.
I was just going to say to your earlier point, I think it's limited life. Yeah. A couple of years max.
So Dexter, what are some of the fun ways you've been using tech and AI?
Look, I'm not sure fun is the right word, because it's if anybody's been trying it, it's really frustrating, right? And I mentioned relevance before, and it is a great tool, but hey, look, it's hard work. You got to go down the rabbit hole, and it's full of bugs. And like you try something, and it looks great, and they've built the agent, and then as you mentioned, you kind of get these AI hallucinations, or it goes wrong. The things that I think I've found have been really helpful has been taking, if you take things like Notion, for example, and how that's now got AI embedded into it, that has been brilliant for workflow. So now, right, I can if I'm doing a search, I'll take all of the information, put it into a spreadsheet, knock that into Notion, creates a Kanban. My client can see exactly where we're at, who we've spoken to, where the interviews are at, and they've got a link to that. And I don't need to give them links to my proprietary tech or anything, right? They're all on that. So I think as a kind of communication tool and a knowledge sharing tool, it's been brilliant. From a content perspective, Claude, and a research perspective, Claude is my co-pilot. So what I mean by that is that when I started the business back in 2016, I remember first 3 weeks, I got to send out an invoice and I was like, yes, shit, how do I send out an invoice? What do I do, right? It was I didn't even get time to celebrate. And I was, I should have gone with Belinda's thing. But fortunately, I called my accountant. He set up Xero, and but everything that I did in the business was reverse engineered from every single thing. So I got a job, send out resumes. Oh, I've got to format the resumes. I'm going to have to outsource or offshore. I've got nothing to outsource. I've got no processes. What do I do? And so kind of what I learned through that was, I actually stripped out a lot of things that weren't really creating a lot of value for customers. So like formatted resumes, they didn't care, right? So stuff like that. What Claude has enabled me to do is to go back to doing more of what I would say is the kind of in-depth value add things you can do for clients, reports, research, all of those things that were just, it would take me like 3-4 months to get that done. Now I can get it done in a week. There's stuff I can get done in minutes that would have taken days. And I think the ultimate thing for me has been, as a small business, every time you look to outsource or use a virtual assistant, not only are you paying that person, but you're taking yourself out of the business to train and instruct and do all of that stuff. And invariably the work comes back and it's not right, and you end up doing it yourself. And so you get hit with this kind of double whammy of paying someone, paying yourself, and you end up doing the work, and kind of it's taking 3 times as long. What I've found with AI is it doesn't get upset when you tell it that the work isn't correct. It just actually does the work correctly. So all of that stuff that, you've got outsourced teams in India doing research, all of that stuff. Claude, I've found, has been fantastic. Proposals, all of the stuff that would just take a lot of time and wasn't really kind of value adding, I've found it's been fantastic for that. And then from a marketing perspective, tools like Riverside, Opus Clip for taking content and repurposing it and being able to just amplify the brand and the message. Where I get people who can't believe that it's just me doing this, and they think I've got this whole team that's doing this amazing job, and it's not. It's just me. But just being consistent and focusing on quality has given this kind of presence, this omnipresence view, right? That, hey, you're everywhere and you know everyone and you're doing all of this stuff, but it's not, right? It's just kind of amplifying through the tools that you've got available. I wish I had a magic bullet for everybody, and that there's this great tool that you can use that's going to make outreach better, and but there isn't. I think what I would be saying to everybody is that if you've learned your craft in recruitment, use these tools to kind of free up your time to do the thing that you need to be doing most of, which is on the phone, in meetings, speaking to people. That's the thing that I've found these tools have been incredible for. And in the last 12 months, I've not spent as much time on the phone since probably 2010 or 2011. It's really been, liberating in that respect.
Yeah, 100%. One of the things I did recently was I was doing some work around my brand and just, business strategy and coming up with, some new ideas and offers to put out in the market, etc. And I front loaded everything into ChatGPT and took, I probably took the best part of a day, probably even longer, just to put everything that I had in there. And now, that was only a few weeks ago, and now the output is just incredible because I took the time up front. And I think, like anything, you have to put in you have to put in the reps to get it to do what you want it to do. And I sometimes think that might be a bit of a missing. I know it was for me, and I finally went, okay, I got to spend some time here to actually feed this thing.
It's now just part of my workflow, right? So I'm using it constantly all day. It's things like, to your point, last month, I was looking at the pipeline and had some challenges. And, initially it started off asking to do a business development plan for the next quarter. And then kind of, as I put the pipeline of work in, kind of, Claude came back and said, hey, your big problem isn't bringing in business. It's actually closing the stuff that you've got. So your priorities should be bump, 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 bump.
Amazing.
And that was, but what was really great about it is I think back to the days when, I was working in recruitment and it wasn't just me, and I was working in a business, and you'd have other recruiters there, and you'd sit and you'd do your Monday morning meeting and your pipeline catch up, and that would be the feedback you'd get. Right. So kind of now I've got this team of kind of, other, recruiters, agents around me that can do specific jobs, but also now can start to give me insights and input. Right now, some of it might be rubbish and you just go, hey, look, that's wrong here. You've made the wrong assumption. Here's why. And you do have to be a little bit conscious that AI is programmed to flatter you. So it's always, but if you're using outsourced providers in India, they're going to do the same thing anyway, right?
I tell it now. I say, don't be nice. Just give it to me like it is. And then it comes back and says, okay, I'll tell you like it is, Belinda.
But look, this is kind of as it learns, right? You kind of, it does do that. And I think this is where, if I was to encourage people, whether you're in recruitment or not, just as part of your work, you've got to be using these tools, right? But recognize also like where the cutoff is of where you create the value for your business or your client or your employer, and where AI has its limitations. Because if all you do is just regurgitate and pass on work that AI has done, well, then you're not going to get paid 200 grand a year for, just playing arbitrage with AI. And I think this is kind of, if you look at the recruitment model, the same is true, right? Like, we're not middlemen anymore, right? We have to become trusted advisors and partners to our clients and be embedded in their business and their plans, and, kind of see ourselves really as a, critical kind of component in their success. And if you're going to see yourself as just, somebody who just flicks candidates' resume, that's kind of, that's playing arbitrage. And look, there's always going to be a market for that, and you're going to kind of hit lucky, but it's not really a business model.
You mentioned silver bullets a little while ago. How long do you think it is before a silver bullet appears for the recruitment space? So we have that wing buddy who hops off the call that we've just taken a job brief from a client. It's already done a shortlist. It's already briefed. It's ad writing agent to write something for posting up online and the website, etc.
Well, that's already there. It's already there, right? So I think this goes back to what I was saying before, Andrew, right? It's like, who's responding to ads? And so for us, our proposition is, hey, look, we work with a top tier of talent, right? Like, this is where we're at. We're speaking to people who are really happy. They're not going anywhere, and we need to present something compelling to them. And guess what? I've got to kiss 100 frogs before I find the prince or princess. And I'm spending 10, 15, 20 hours in conversations with the person that you hire. That is a very, very different proposition to what AI can do. And, you've then got to add layers on top of that, right? So even with the trust that I've got in the market, the position that I've got in the market, all that does is it just means that when I reach out to people on LinkedIn, if I don't know them, they know me, and they're open to having a conversation. But all that does is just open the door. All of the steps that go after that, it's so much work.
It is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting. I was reading Ross Clements' email this morning that came through. Did you see that? And
I haven't read it yet. No.
Oh, no. And so Seek, and now they're hiring somebody, but there was a sort of an undertone there that they're rethinking that model of success fee.
Yeah.
So, and bringing
there's
in
clear
AI
signs they're doing that.
And using AI to predict what the success will be, and then basing the fee for the ad on that.
Yeah.
Interesting.
I mean, I think in the world of AI, right, we've talked about this, right? And you talked about how much time you had to invest to get, get use from it. If you look at the whole, issue with recruitment, and why I personally believe AI and all these AI startups and people who have never recruited before, they're all disrupting recruitment, right? We've seen it 10 years ago. We're seeing it again now, and it will fail. And here's why it will fail, right? A job description is a bullshit document. It's made up, right? Half the time it's 5 years old. HR have said to a hiring manager, all right, and all they want to do is hire someone. All right, fill in all these competencies, fill in all of these things. They just make it up, right? Then you get the resume, which is somebody who's just put that into ChatGPT, or if they've written it themselves. As a recruiter, whenever anybody reaches out, I'm perfect for this job, my immediate thought is, says who? You. Right, well, you're not the arbiter of, kind of that's why I'm here. That's why there's an interview process. That's why there's all these other things. So I think if you look at any technology solution that is using, works of fiction, which a CV is, a job description is a work of fiction, and why I can say that with some conviction is pretty much every single job description that I've had. In fact, in 50% of cases, right, when the client sent it to me and we've had a briefing, just by asking simple questions like, what's the big problem you're trying to solve? Turns out that they don't need to hire that person. There's other ways that they can solve the problem. And I think what you've got in terms of the kind of platform style recruitment, job boards, all of that stuff is it's like literally just like a classifieds ad. Lonely Hearts columns trying to match people. That, it's like there's no photographs, there's nothing. It's just, you can say whatever you want. You're handsome, you're this, you're that, and you're none of those things. So I think that's where, if I was to say, not for recruiters not to worry, it's that. But if all you're going to do is replicate that by keyword matching and, not really taking a proper brief. I mean, again, this has gone back to fundamentals, right? The first thing you were taught, briefing, right? Like that is where you fill the role, is it the brief? And I used to go to briefs where, you'd sit and there'd be like 5 other recruiters there. And you're like, what is it?
Or you'd ask for a brief and they send you a job description. You're like, the job description isn't a brief, it's a job description.
Exactly, as I said, right? Like, and how many times, right, and I fell into this trap, hence why, that question that I ask in the briefing is fundamental, right? Is why invest 6 weeks so that you can then recognize that actually you don't need to hire anyone because the people you've already got in the business have stepped up. And I think this is kind of where, again, when you're playing this kind of sausage factory style recruitment or contingent based recruitment model, where you're really not demonstrating any value other than sending out an invoice for a candidate accepting a job, regardless of whether the right person or not. Unfortunately, what you then get into is just this game that's based on price. There's no relationship there. There's no opportunity to consult. When I started, we were called recruitment consultants, right? And I think very quickly, and I remember Greg Savage saying this in 2005, it's like, are you consultants or order takers? Get off the emails, get on the phones, get out to meetings and go and meet with people. And look, I think there were elements of that were right. I kind of personally thought, hey, well, emails are great communication tool. So if I need to do things en masse, that's great, right? But if I need to negotiate or need to deal with an issue, I can't do that on phone. Or if I need to sell, and I've got to sell in person or on the phone. So I think it's those kind of fundamentals that still remain true, even though the technology is way more advanced than it was even back in 2005. Fundamentals are still, if anything, they're more kind of important than ever.
Love your approach to this, Dexter, because you're very much firmly planted in the what works, what we know as an industry works, but saying, okay, we've got this new stuff coming in. How does it fit into what I'm doing? I'm not going to buy into all of it. I'm going to pick and choose what's right for me. And I love that attitude, because a lot of the founders that I speak to, they are not so confident in their own ability to pick and choose what's right. But I think you sort of showing us that be confident in the process and the rigor that you put around your business, and then you decide which way you go from there. You haven't said that in so many ways, but that's what I've kind of picked up on.
I'm not going to sit here and tell people you should go and sell retained or you should go and do this, right? Like, I think you've got to have flexibility and you've got to work with your clients. But I think what you do have to have, and again, what you've talked about there, Belinda, what my clients, like tech founders, call immutable truths. So when they're trying to solve a problem or, look at a problem to solve and launch a product, they ask, like, what are the immutable truths? So one of my clients and a really good friend of mine, a guy called Alex Badran, who's the founder of an app called Spriggy, which is a kids' pocket money app. It's like got over 1 million customers.
Kids have used it.
Yeah, it's brilliant, right? He's one of the, he's just an incredible human being, right? Like, really great guy, super humble, but the smartest guy a person I've ever met. And he talked about, hey, for us, the immutable truths at Spriggy are parents are always going to love their kids. They're always going to care about their kids. They're always going to want to see their kids do better than they did. So how do we embed that into our products? And I think ultimately, if you look at recruitment, Greg Savage's immutable truth, your clients want the right person fast, not the best person, the right person fast. Like, that's an immutable truth. Go where the money goes. That's an immutable truth. And I think these are the things that as recruiters, we kind of, I was given advice when I started Tier 1 people, and obviously went to all of those people, and, they gave me 2 immutable truths, and one of them I wanted to disregard, right? Which was, the first one was start off baby steps. Don't go and get an office and, spend all this money on branding and all that stuff. Just, recruit from your bedroom, get some traction. And then the other one was specialize or focus in a niche. And that was the bit that I thought, hey, well, I'm not sure I want to do that, because there's, and I think what I took from that at the time was, what I could see changing was this discipline where, you only ever recruit accountants, or you only ever recruit. I'd recruited loads of different disciplines in my career. And what I could see was, particularly in the world that I was working in, most of my clients were just focused on getting somebody who could operate right across a business. And so when you're looking at people who've only ever done one thing, that's great in a big corporate. But for the world that I was operating in, it wasn't it wasn't that kind of relevant. And so I thought, hey, well, I'm just going to go, startups, and that would be my space. And it went well initially, but I think after the first year where you write off goodwill, the second year was a disaster. And that was when I kind of put the FinTech badge on the business and said, hey, look, I've got to pick one thing, like which is the one that you're going to kind of put your money on. And that like literally kind of transformed the business overnight.
Yeah, you're singing to my
all
tune.
Of a sudden, yeah, because all of a sudden, right, I was getting people who weren't even fintechs that I was trying to get business from saying, hey, we're like a tech business, but we want to get somebody from fintech because we've just seen what Afterpay are doing and they're going on a tear, bro. So once you put that badge on, it's kind of like this peacock's tail flashing, right, where all of a sudden people get attracted to you.
I can tell you in the 8 years I've been running Recruitment Garage, I've seen probably 2 people run generalist agencies well. And the only reason they were able to do it is because they were exceptional, but they also had exceptional networks.
Yeah.
And everybody else I've seen that sort of says, I think we're going to miss out if we don't go wider. I'm banging my head going, it doesn't work that way.
And that was the thing as well, right? It was like, I was going, should I do data? Should I do fintech? Should I do, right? There was all of these things, right? Like, that you kind of hear the noise, and there's so much noise out there, right? And, should I do AI? It's really difficult. And particularly, you kind of, when you think you're leaving things off the table, and you're a small business and you've got to put food on the table, right? It's a really difficult thing to do. But I think ultimately, if you're brave enough to do it, kind of the fortune favors the brave, and you'll find that things will kind of start to happen. And then, you just meet the right people, and you kind of, but a lot of it is just having that framework and just the principles and sticking true to them, that's the hardest thing, right?
Yeah. And I think with all the, you do need, like, there are markets winning and losing right now, but I think that's where you just have to be commercially savvy. You have to keep abreast of what's working. And if something is dying, if it is having a Kodak moment, then you get out and you start something different. That's just how it is. That's just what you've got to do.
Look, and I look at, kind of working in recruitment companies, whether it was the .com crash or the GFC, and, you kind of get a really bad quarter, you get a bad 6 months right across the business. You got 1 or 2 consultants doing well. And it's like, oh, should we do, candidate services, or should we do this, right? And you go changing your model, and then by the time you've done it, that market's gone. Right. And you kind of, the stuff that you were really good at, people have come in and started, you've taken your eye off the ball. So I think you've got to be brave and just stick through it. And look, the reality is, I've talked to recruitment buddies a couple of weeks back, we're all recruitment business owners. We're having lunch, and we're like, I remember one person, a guy called Neil Galvin, when I started my business, he was like a couple of years ahead, and we caught up, and he said, I was having a bad quarter, and he said, look, you got to stop thinking about months and quarters. And as a recruitment business owner, think about years. Like, have I had a good year, not a good month or a good quarter, right? And we caught up for lunch last week. We're like, yeah, I'm starting to think now, is it a good 5 years? Is it rather than a good year? Because I think that's kind of ultimately, what you're seeing when you are a specialist. You can't just then kind of go and, it's not like, we haven't got the luxury of being Madonna and reinventing ourselves every 3 years. You do have to kind of stick with, hey, well, look, I've only got a certain amount of resources. And if I go into another market, there's already a load of competition there, and I'm starting from the bottom. So I think you've got to make those decisions really, really carefully. I just see, well, I'm sure you see it more than me, recruiters just flip-flop all the time, right? And I think it's kind of there
is a grass is always greener concept, and I've seen people have a rough time in one market they've been in for a while, and they've say, I'm going to go over here, and then you speak to someone who's in that market over here, and they're wanting to go somewhere else. It's like you've got to do some really clever analysis to see what the potential of the market is. Is it a blip? Is it a long-term thing? And that's where, you can't just guess this stuff. You have to go in and analyze your competitors and, look at the research and, go into places like Crunchbase and watch the news and actually don't watch the news.
And one of the things one of the things that's actually really helped me in my business is I don't really pay any attention at all to the recruitment industry in terms of innovation, what's happening. And what's been really interesting is to see if I look at some of the inspiration for my business and the approach that we've taken. I've looked at my clients who are enterprise software businesses and been able to recognize that actually the process that they go through for sales is pretty much identical to the process that we're going through when we're trying to hire somebody for a leadership position or a mission critical role in the business. And it's usually a 3 to 6 month process where there's multiple stakeholders involved. So many things can go wrong. And it's not about, kind of just, trying to convince the wrong person that this is the right opportunity. It's actually being able to bring all of those people together and to get to an outcome that works for everyone. And if I was to go to recruitment events, honestly, I'd just be getting, oh, how's your pipeline? And the
Every
usual
time.
stuff, right? Like, and it's like, and even when people tell you, they're lying. I mean, there's one guy I work with where, he built nothing in 6 months, and we bump into old colleagues on the street and be like, yeah, I'm crushing it. And you're like, what? It's kind of, and like people are going, oh yeah, here he's killing it. It's like, well, he's killing the business.
Yeah.
But I think this is kind of, these kind of echo chambers that we get in the industry. And when the ironic thing is, right, if we just stepped out and stepped into our clients and actually looked at what they were doing, not even ask them, just look at how they operate their businesses, we'd get a lot of answers and kind of ideas and inspiration for what we could do in our own businesses.
Yeah, that's so true. And also, I remember going to a conference like years ago when I set up my first agency, and there was a guy called, what's his name? Vern Harnish. He called himself, I think, the growth guy or something. But I remember him saying, when things get tough, go out and talk to your clients. Don't try and do it all internally and figure it out. Go out and speak to the market, and you'll hear what to do. So that's something that
look, and I actually
forgot.
did that when I started the business, so the first 2-3 weeks was just, I was in a tiz, website, ABN, bank accounts, all of this stuff, right? You just don't know where to start. It was literally like having a baby, right, for the first time, and you were just making it up as you went along. And I was stressed after the first 2 or 3 weeks. And I remember going for a walk on the beach, and it was like almost like, God spoke. It was cloudy, the clouds parted, the sun shone, and this voice in my head went, find work, fill work, get paid.
Yeah,
And
get
I went
money
home,
in the door.
Yeah, exactly, right. And I went home, I got the LinkedIn, the whole contact list. There was about 5,000 people on there. And I just went, hey, who's given you business before and might give it to you in the future? And there's about 100 people on there. Okay, you got to do 100 coffees in 100 days. And I just sent them all an email and said, hey, look, I've started my own business. I've got some ideas of things I wanted to do differently that I think might work for your business. But I know that you'll call bullshit on me and you'll be honest. And hey, if you had 5 minutes to share, you could save me from making the biggest mistake ever in my life.
Nice.
And they were like, hey, let's catch up for lunch. Let's go. And like literally 2 weeks later, I'd sent out my first invoice.
Nice. Yeah,
Within
clever.
the first 3 months, had done revenue that I was, hopeful I might do in the first 12 months.
Smart.
And I think it's that thing, right, of like, just go out and speak to your customers. They've got all the answers, right? And they've got the work, right? And
I think most people like to help other people.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
By you framing it in that way, saying, hey, I don't want to make the biggest mistake of my life. Can you help me out?
And look, I think what happens, Andrew, when people ask for help, and I get this all the time, say, oh, can we catch up for a coffee? Yeah. I just want to ask some advice. And I'm like, but that coffee cost me $500.
Yeah.
When I factor in my time and out the business and all the other stuff, like, can you not just call me and give you an answer in 2 minutes? And I think what people tend to do is they kind of, they lack this directness, or they want help on their terms, when actually people want to help, but they want to help on their terms.
There's a fine line.
There is
a fine line. I get it too. can you do? And I was like, I've only got so many hours in a day. I'd love to help. In an ideal world, I'd help everybody for free if I could, but that's not going to feed my kids. So we have to work out. We want to pay it forward, and I always like to give people early on a good start, but you got to acknowledge your own worth.
I think this is where content comes into it, right? And what you can do on LinkedIn and YouTube and everything else is, that I actually really care. Even though my business model is 100% focused on clients, I clearly care about candidate experience. I clearly don't want to see people struggling to find a job, but I can't spend coffees giving people one-on-one advice on what to do in the job market. And so I think this is where things like, LinkedIn, you can really amplify that, rather than sitting and having a coffee with someone, just record it and put it on YouTube. And every time somebody asks you, send them to that and say, hey, look, I get asked this all the time. It's a simple process that, is the same for everybody. Here's how you do it. And just put that and let people get that. I think this is where, again, it's just using the tools to free you up to do the things that you need to be spending all of your time doing.
And that's where you can use AI as well. You can feed all that information out and say, give me the 20 highest. You probably know them you do know them intuitively. Give me the top 20 problems.
I just did this yesterday, Belinda.
Did you? Yeah.
Put into Claude and said, hey, I want to do a podcast monologue about 10 minutes long about the job search. Here's previous stuff that I've written about it. And here are some things that I want to cover. Can you also find some research which backs this up?
Yeah, clever.
And like literally 2 minutes later, I've got a 10-minute monologue. Boom. I've recorded it on Riverside. It's all ready to go out next week, right? And it was literally 30 minutes of my time.
Yeah, and it'll be really valuable for people.
And it'll create huge value for people. Yeah. And I think this is what, kind of people, as an industry, if we can get those kind of immutable truths and those fundamentals and get back to that, like you're going to find that you're going to be actually more valuable than ever. Because just like when job boards came out in the early 2000s, how are you going to differentiate between what somebody's saying they've got an AI to do and what's actually truth, right? And so if you think of a recruiter who's spent time in an industry and knows a lot of people and the information that we're privy to, like that is, and if you consider humans are the greatest kind of computers on the planet, right? How we process data through all of our senses, right? Where we then use that intuition to say to a client, hey, the candidate said something, feel a bit uneasy. This is what they've said, or this is what I've heard. What do you think? Yeah, you know what? Our gut was telling us it was something that's not quite right. You've just prevented your client from making a hiring mistake that's going to cost them hundreds of thousands of dollars and set them back 6 to 12 months. How you show your value, not by matching people super fast and getting a short list and then meeting the people and going, none of these people are right. But yeah, they match the job spec. And it's, well, yeah, maybe the job spec isn't right. So I think so it really, for me, the tools are really about how do you just get to spend more time with your customers. If you're going to invest anything as a recruiter, invest it into the craft of recruitment, which now is more about human behavior, marketing, sales methodology, and kind of relationship building and dealing with difficult situations and being able to negotiate, like almost like a hostage negotiator sometimes, right? And kind of perfect those skills, the human side of it, and let the technology stuff do the stuff that we all do it, right? You don't want to pick up the phone. So, we used to call it paper shuffling before computers. You'd get your papers and your boss would walk past and you'd like shake them, pretend that you were doing something. But those tasks that, they don't create any value, but it gives us an excuse to not do the things that we know we should be doing. And I think that's where kind of AI is going to help those who are really disciplined and go, okay, I've got to focus on these things because they're going to move the dial for my client. That's who AI is really going to benefit.
I think that's such good advice, and it's a really kind of nice note to wrap everything up. Roger, is there anything else that you'd like to cover?
Yeah, I was just going to ask, I agree with everything you said around bringing the human back into the recruitment loop rather than for many years try to use email, other campaigns that we don't have to speak to somebody, right? And I think to your point, the ones that are going to win are those ones that are going to spend more time with the customer, talking to them, strategizing with them, advising them. To do that, what technologies are you keeping an eye on that may not be just right yet to allow you to spend a little bit more time in the field, having coffees with the right people?
Yeah, look, I think for me, there's a tool that I use called Lemlist, which is for outreach through LinkedIn. There's a few things they've got to get right, but when they do, I think that for me is, being able to integrate something where I can take a search, put in a brief, and then go, hey, you just go and put the whole long list together and do that outreach. That's the bit that I think that's going to impact more businesses overseas and outsource providers than it will actual recruiters. But I don't see anything that is going to really kind of, move the needle more than it already has, because the impact is going to be on the roles that are impacted in our clients. That's the thing that recruiters really need to worry about, is there's going to be a lot of roles that, aren't going to be relevant anymore. And I think this is where, you've got to focus on mission critical hires, things that your client can't do themselves, getting them access to people that they can't get access to themselves, putting a kind of professionalism around the process that means that their brand is protected as well. All of those things, I think, are kind of, really the threats. I don't see there's going to be an AI solution that's going to be able to trawl through all of the data on there and find the perfect match, for the very reasons that we've talked about. What you see online is utter bullshit. And really what we're hired for is to find how people act when they're under pressure, right? Like, that's the little bits of information that we get of, hey, when it was COVID, this person didn't really, act in the best interests of the business and they're left under a cloud. We need to dig deeper in that in interviews to understand like how they respond when they're under pressure. These are the things that I think, kind of really make us indispensable.
Love that. I love your optimism and the practicalities around, the whole conversation. And because I speak to a lot of people who are, they're worried. They just don't know which way it's going to go. So it's nice to hear that sort of level head kind of go, someone who's been in the industry for a while and talk about what a lot of the senior people in the industry that have seen all this change before, what they think.
What I can say to you is, I'm doing a lot of work with my clients who are doing, they are doing cutting edge stuff, with AI, and most of it is around cost reduction and efficiency, right? So the stuff that you're hearing about, look, we're going to have robots walking around in the next 5 years and all of that stuff, right? It's going to happen, right? But the reality is that most, and this isn't something that's happened overnight, right? Like, this has been happening over the 20 odd years I've been in recruitment. The roles, particularly in kind of office work and corporate work, they're all outcome driven now. Nobody's being hired to perform a bunch of tasks. Like, that stuff got offshored 15 years ago. So I think, look, the reality is that, there's not going to be like this mass, everybody's going to lose their job. Your roles are going to change and some roles will become irrelevant, but also you've got this opportunity now where you can go and spin up a business in 48 hours. And if that's what you really want, and you want that level of freedom, there's nothing to stop you, right?
Yeah, love that. Well, that's a nice note to finish on. Go out there, show the world.
Look,
put your
like,
stake in the sand.
Time to be alive. Like, it's just incredible, right?
Yeah, I think that too. Dexter, where can people get a hold of you? So just to reiterate again, that you are an executive search professional in the FinTech space, and you have the wonderful podcast, which we'll put the link to, called the FinTech Chatter podcast. But yeah, what's the best way?
LinkedIn's probably the best way. I'm, post on there every day. People send me a message or want to connect. I'm happy to do that.
Wonderful. Thank you.
I'm not a big fan of catching up for coffees with
I got that.
stranger recruitment owners who want to pick my brains about how I run my business. I think you kind of got to go and find your own way. But I'm always happy to kind of point people in the right direction.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. Well, thank you so much. I invited you to come on, and we'd never even met. We've just been talking online, and you graciously said, yes, I'll come and add as much. Your words were, I'll add value where I can, and you absolutely have done that. So I really appreciate
Thanks
you
very
giving
much.
us your time.
Really appreciate it. And look, it's kind of great that, we've got platforms like this where, we can share insights, and outside of the kind of pretense of events where we've all got to pretend that the pipeline's great.
With the shield.
Yeah, and we're all killing it. Yeah.
Yeah, absolute pleasure, Dexter. I loved I was hanging on every word
Brilliant.
you said. Thank you so much.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks,
Cheers,
Dexter.
bye.
Thanks for joining us for today's episode of The Tech Savvy Recruiter. If you'd like to stay up to date with the latest recruitment trends and insights, make sure that you remember to subscribe so you don't miss an episode. Also, if you'd like to speak to Andrew about turning your tech stack into your secret weapon, or myself around creating an agency that delivers you more money, more meaning, and more freedom, we'd absolutely love to chat. Reach out to us on LinkedIn, and we look forward to seeing you next time. Thank you for your support.